Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to record this audio, but again, you're welcome to interrupt. No, you're welcome to interrupt and question as you normally would. Okay, so this morning, on Parshas Yisro, in which the Ten Commandments appear, that's this week, and one of the Ten Commandments is the observance of Shabbos. It's the fourth, right? The fourth of the Ten Commandments, is it? I think.
Yeah.
Or is it number 3? It's number 4?
But they talked about Shabbos in last week's parsha.
Yeah, they were commanded for Shabbos earlier in Mara, but the Ten Commandments included Shabbos. I thought it might be nice and appropriate to discuss a little bit about the mitzvah of Shabbos candles.
Yeah.
And last time we spoke, it came up at one of the classes we did here earlier, and people had some questions about it, so I thought maybe it'd be a nice idea to go through that. Additionally, this year is a little bit earlier than this year, as you can see on the page in front of you, in Elul of 1974. So that'd be a little bit more than 50 years ago. It was the beginning of the Rebbe's Shabbos candle campaign, part of the 10 mitzvah campaigns. It was a Shabbos candle campaign which started in Elul of 1974, which, it was launched then, but obviously throughout the year following, throughout 1975, that we spoke about the Shabbos candle campaign. So really we're marking 50 years, since that particular campaign. So I thought it'd be appropriate to discuss that. So we're going to go through some like the halachic underpinnings, understanding where it comes from, how it operates. And when we understand the underpinnings of what Shabbos candles is on its halachic level and on its, let's say, drush mystical level, its level of its meaning and so on, we'll have a better understanding of how to observe it. And a lot of the questions that come up as to when and how and why and what and where will be addressed once we understand how this mitzvah works. So the page in front of you, we're going to come back to it soon. I'll just point out one thing here. The first text, where it says sources, it's Yalkut Shemaini. It's a midrash. So there's a line in there that they kept on repeating in regard to the Shabbos candle campaign. It's the second to last word on the top line. Im shmartem nerot shel Shabbos. If you observe the candles of Shabbos, ani mar lachem, I, says God, will show you nerot shel Tzion, the light of Zion. So you observe the light of Shabbos, and I will grant you the light of Zion. They quoted that very often, as in the candle lighting being a special connection with bringing light and protection and peace and so on to the land of Israel. And on top of that, Nerot Shabbat Kodesh, as you can see in the line there, where it says background, those 3 letters that start those words, Nerot Shabbat Kodesh, spell out the word neshek. Neshek means ammunition. So the spiritual ammunition is neshek, nun shin kuf, stands for Nerot Shabbat Kodesh, the light of the Shabbos candles. It also means, in Hebrew, literally the word neshek means ammunition. So this is the spiritual ammunition for the Jewish people, is neshek, is Ner Shabbos Kodesh. I think Rabbi Malol last week or 3 weeks ago in Shul on Shabbos, mentioned this funny story of Mrs. Sternberg, who took on the lead role 50 years ago to begin and expound and expand and so on the Shabbos candle lighting campaign. And she was traveling somewhere, maybe to Israel, in connection with a Shabbos candle lighting campaign, and she has a suitcase full of little Shabbos candle kits. And when she gets to security, they asked, Yesh tachem neshek? Do you have neshek? Do you have ammunition? She says, Ken, yesh li mizvadam balim mizeh. I have a suitcase full of neshek.
That's what I said.
Referring to Shabbos candles, because in her head, neshek is Shabbos candles. Whereas the border guard, of course, asking if she had ammunition. Like, a little funny story, but it's makes the point. Okay, so in that context, again, it's appropriate to discuss a little bit about the Shabbos candles. So we're going to begin with the halachic underpinnings of the Shabbos candles. And we're going to conclude back to the Rebbe where we started, which is the Rebbe's campaign. Because in the Rebbe's campaign, he instituted something on a halachic level that wasn't, at least not widely observed until the Rebbe's campaign. And that created a little bit of a polemic in the halachic world around this enactment. So we'll start with the halachic. We'll go through a little bit of that and come back to the Rebbe's campaign and how it played out on the halachic level. So, first of all, it should be noted that Shabbos candles is a rabbinic commandment. Right? There are 613 biblical commandments. There are 7 rabbinic commandments. And one of these 7 is the Shabbos candle observance. Now, no worries. Good morning. Most, like every mitzvah, there are reasons and backgrounds to them. Even the biblical ones often have reasons. Sometimes Scripture itself says the reason. Sometimes it's in the oral tradition. Or sometimes the Torah says there is no reason and I'm telling you to do it because I want you to do it. But when it comes to rabbinic commandments, certainly there's the rationale behind it. I mean, what were the sages thinking when they enacted this particular mitzvah? Right? Washing our hands. See if I can get all 7. Erev, washing our hand. Candles. Hanukkah, Purim. I'm missing 2 more. Can't remember. But there are 2 more. There are 7. There are 7 mitzvahs of our sages. Rabbinic, yeah. So what's the nature of this rabbinic commandment and what undergirds their decision to implement this? Now we find 3 reasons. One is, I guess, more spiritual in nature, and the other 2 are more halachic in nature. And each one, we can give another word for it in Hebrew. Kavod, oneg, and shalom. So the first is kavod Shabbos, the honor of Shabbos. So it's honoring Shabbos by lighting candles, especially considering that our sages teach us that on Shabbos one gets an extra soul, an neshama yisera, an added soul. That is like an added surge of soulful energy on Shabbos. The soul is compared to a candle. So light a candle in honor of the Shabbos and the soul surge that it gives us. That's one reason given. That's less halachic, it's more spiritual in nature. Halachic means more in the practical realm of observance and ritual and behavior. So the second 2 are more connected to that in halachic. Oneg, which means the light of Shabbos. We're required to delight in the Shabbos. And imagining that we exist in a world pre-electricity, you could not enjoy the Shabbos, the primary enjoyment being your Shabbos meal, and your Friday night meal being the primary of the meals of Shabbos. Friday night is a primary meal, so you could not enjoy your meal unless you had light. It's a very practical thing. Sages are telling us light Shabbos candles because otherwise you cannot enjoy your meal. It's pretty simple. That would be number 2. So you have kavod and you have oneg. And number 3 is shalom, peace in the home. Again, for a very practical thing. If you don't have lights in the house, again, imagining we live in a pre-electricity day. So if you don't have any lights in the house, you're going to walk around and that's literally the terminology. You'll trip on sticks and stones that are lying around. You bump into each other. You can't enjoy Shabbos. It's not going to be any peace in the home. People are going to be bumping into each other. So you got to have lights. So on the halachic level, again, every mitzvah has multiple layers. The halachic, the spiritual thing. We're sticking on the halachic right now. We'll come back to the spiritual later. But on the halachic level, the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles is very practical. And 2 practical applications. 1, to enjoy your meal. And 2, bring peace in the home, because if you don't see anything, there's no peace. You're bumping into people, into walls, into things. So it's very, very practical in nature.
They didn't light candles before they lit the Shabbos candles?
It's a good question. So would they not have... Excellent question. Would they not have lit candles before this enactment of the sages? It's a very good question. And presumably, they probably would have. They would have had candles because they would have had candles. But nonetheless, but it wasn't the mitzvah. The mitzvah is only enacted once the sages do so, which means now you can make a blessing on that. Beforehand, they would have done it at a practical. In other words, let's say you're sweeping your home for cholent, or for Shabbos, or you're putting the cholent on the pot. It's a practical thing. You want to have hot food for the next day, but no one's making a bracha as they put their cholent up. But once the sages turn it into a mitzvah, now we're making a bracha, so it has an extra oomph. But in the practical world, this is the reasoning for the mitzvah. Again, presumably you're right. I imagine people would have done so anyway beforehand. Otherwise, again, you don't have light. How can you enjoy your meal? How can you enjoy your Shabbos? So that's the basic halachic underpinnings of the mitzvah.
Interestingly enough, there are times you might have forgotten to plug in your cholent pot, but if it's a mitzvah, you'll never forget.
Yeah.
So there is that little, like... It's
true. The mitzvah helps you not forget. So that's probably, could be also true. Where in the past, people forgot and people sat in the dark. There actually was some of the Karaites, the ascetics, used to sit in the dark on Shabbos because they took the biblical instruction not to light a candle to mean you shouldn't have any candles lit. And they literally would sit in the dark. So the sages say, no, mitzvah to light because you have to enjoy right? Which, again, the aesthetics,
On every-
Shabbos wasn't about enjoyment, it was about like spiritual asceticism. And the sages are saying, no, enjoy, light your Shabbos candles, which is part of the reason why we have chalent, by the way. You have to have hot food on Shabbos day to demonstrate that it's about enjoying Shabbos, even though you can't cook on Shabbos, but you're allowed to have hot food that was cooking the whole Shabbos or whatever. Under the circumstance they were allowed. Sorry, I want to say something.
No, I don't know. Maybe, well, I don't know. Whatever I have to say is probably. But I'm saying like they lit every night, like on a regular dark night,
Correct.
you would light it, and maybe this sanctifies the mundane in a way also.
Good point.
I don't know.
Yeah, if you would have had candles lit anyway in your house. The truth is, I imagine that, I don't know, it depends how expensive it was to get oil and whatnot and where you were and
But
whether you can afford it or not.
As you said,
Yeah.
following what Debbie said, the actual mitzvah then has the second point, which is the soul,
Spiritual. Yeah.
soul, because then you can sort
Yes.
of add that
So
in.
again, let's make that clear. Every mitzvah has, every verse in Torah, and certainly every mitzvah has like multiple levels, right? You have like its level of its practical application, which we call halachic, and like the real world application, and then you'll have the deeper meanings as you go along. Now, when you're making a decision on, let's say, okay, which we'll get to in a second, when you're making a decision on, let's say, when is it appropriate to make a blessing on the mitzvah, it would have to like satisfy the halachic practical level, otherwise you couldn't make the bracha, because you weren't performing the mitzvah in its technical sense, right? So understanding the technical underpinnings of the mitzvah is very helpful, and understanding how to observe the mitzvah, because we'll see presently.
If you miss 5 minutes, you're done.
Okay, so once Shabbos starts, of course, you can't light already.
It's 18 minutes before.
That's right. We have 8. So we'll get to that in a moment. Okay, so it's rabbinic mitzvah, and the mitzvahs, the halachic reason again is because of honoring the Shabbos and peace in the home. Okay, now we framed it where you don't have electricity in the house, but we do have electricity. So it seems almost like on the practical halachic level, the mitzvah is almost a moot point, because we have light, electric light, so we can see our meal and enjoy it, and we also aren't bumping into each other. So how do we observe this mitzvah? And more difficultly is like, to the point made earlier, how do you make a bracha on such a mitzvah where you're not actually doing the technical meaning of the mitzvah anymore? Which becomes like a very big problem. Now, what's interesting is that between these two reasons of peace in the home and enjoying the Shabbos meal, different authorities, halachic authorities, place emphasis on one over the other. Now, the Alter Rebbe, founder of Chabad, in his Code of Jewish Law, places primary emphasis on the peace element rather than the enjoyment of the meal element. Now, the peace element is that you shouldn't bump into each other, is definitely something that's a moot point considering that we have lights around the house using electricity. Because when it comes to the enjoyment, and at the end of the day, this is what we rely on nowadays to make the blessing over the Shabbos candles. We rely on the fact that having candles at your meal, even if you already have electric lights, still enhances your enjoyment of the meal. Case in point, you go to a nice restaurant, they put candles there. They can afford electricity, but they're putting candles because it adds to the ambiance. So having your candles at your meal adds to your enjoyment of the meal, and that becomes the primary function on the halachic level of the observance of the mitzvah of Shabbos candles, is that it enhances the enjoyment of your meal. And therefore, a few practical things that come as a result of this. Number one, if a person's in a situation where they cannot light actual candles of flame, a woman just gave birth and she's in the hospital over Shabbos, and they don't allow her to light candles, she can absolutely make a bracha and light one of those electric tea lights. Because again, the mitzvah is to produce light so you can enjoy your meal. She's doing just that, even if she's not using an actual physical flame. She's not using a primitive quote-unquote flame. She's using an electric light. She can do that. Because again, she's satisfying the mitzvah. The primary mitzvah is you enjoy your meal and you don't walk into walls. Good, she's doing that by lighting the electric light. So if that's the case, she can do that. That's number one. Number two is the primary location of your Shabbos lights should be at your table where you're going to be eating. It's an important component. Sometimes it gets lost, where we're lighting in one place and eating in a different place. One should light the Shabbos candles where they eat, because again, that's the primary mitzvah, that you can enjoy it. Moreover, and this is a little practical tip, something I do in my house. If you have a lot of guests, or a lot of people around the table, and you're lighting lots of candles, sometimes it can be very hard to have all those candles sitting on the table. You can't see the people across the table. It's very difficult to do so. So what I do in my house is I have most of the candles on like the brick front on the side, and then the 2 candles on the table. Because the primary mitzvah, first of all, actually the primary mitzvah is to have 1 candle, because the point is to have light so you can enjoy the meal. There's an added component to have 2 to commemorate the fact that the Torah uses 2 different terms to describe the observance of Shabbos: zachar, remember; shamar, guard. So 1 candle for each mention of the Shabbos in the 2 times that the 10 commandments appear in the Torah, once in this week's parsha, once in Vet Chanan, and 1 time it says remember Shabbos, zachar, and the other place it says shamar, remember. So to commemorate that, you should have 2 candles. Okay, so those are the primary mitzvahs of 2 candles. The rest of the candles are by custom that we light 1 per each member of the household, and so on. Right. So what I do in my house is I have all those candles on the side of the brick front. It's still near the table, but on the table itself have 2 candles. And what my wife will do is she'll light those 2 candles last, and that's the one she's making the bracha over. So it's like the bracha is being made at the primary candles that the mitzvah is being observed at. And that way it doesn't disrupt your table with a bunch of candles. But still, you're getting the mitzvah, which is the 2 candles at your Shabbos table.
What happens when you have to light the Shabbos candle and then you have to go next door or down the street to go to eat at somebody's house?
That's a very good question.
Which
So
happens all the time.
Happens all the time. So if you're not eating at home, So in the old day, if you weren't eating at home, you still had the mitzvah of lighting the Shabbos candles, because when you come back, you're not bumping into each other thanks to the light, which was the other component of the mitzvah. Today, that's already a moot point because we have the electric lights. So what value is there to the Shabbos candles if you're not eating at home on the halachic level? It's a great question. And it's a very good question. And I'll tell you 3 things.
Okay.
Number 1, all agree that you should light your Shabbos candles and make your bracha.
Say that again?
All agree you should light your Shabbos candle and make your bracha.
At home.
At home, even though you're not eating at home.
Right.
Now, the reason for that is because once the mitzvah becomes a mitzvah, we want to keep the mitzvah. And then we're going to reverse engineer to make it work. But we want the mitzvah to stay. We don't want the mitzvah to disappear because the reason is gone, so to speak. The mitzvah is a mitzvah. We want to keep it.
But isn't it
So-
also for Shalom Bayis?
Yeah, so but the shalom bayis is covered by the electric light already because you're not bumping into anybody already, right?
Okay.
So, but we want to reverse engineer so that the mitzvah still is maintained.
Right.
So light your Shabbos candles, no problem. 2 solutions I found in the modern halachic authorities to that question. Although I should also say I haven't seen it widely observed, but I've still seen it written. Number 1, when you come back home, your candles are still lit. You can have a cookie or a tea at the candles, so you still enjoyed your Shabbos candles by eating something. Option B I saw was that if you light your Shabbos candles, and in so doing, when you make the bracha, you also have in mind the electric lights, which again is fulfilling your mitzvah of not bumping into the walls, then good, you did your bracha, which is on the Shabbos candles and on the rest of the electric lights in your house. Which, now Levi New speaking, we're going to assume that everybody has that in mind anyway. Not consciously, but when you go, in other words like this, before Shabbos starts, it's actually a halachic requirement, considering this whole mitzvah that you have to have lights around your house, so you don't bump into each other. And actually this obligation is more on the husband, actually. Is to go around the house and make sure that all the lights that need to be on are on, and all the lights that need to be off are off.
Right.
It's part of an extension of the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles. So even if you didn't have that consciously in mind when you lit your Shabbos candles, we're going to assume that de facto it's part of your Shabbos candle observance to make sure there's proper lighting in the house, and therefore your bracha covers all of it. I haven't seen that written anywhere, but the reality is everybody's making the bracha. That's the reality.
But the key is...
And I'm not going to make an announcement and say that they're all making a bracha in vain because they didn't have in mind. I think that would be a wrong approach to take. So I'm going to take the approach that de facto, it's covered in all the candles that they have in the house, including all the lights and electric lights and so on. In other words, they're setting their house up for Shabbos in terms of lighting. That's the mitzvah. Set your house up for Shabbos in terms of lighting. And you're doing that, whether through the candles or the electric lights or both combined. So the bracha covers it all. That would be my answer to that question. Yeah.
If you have fancier candles on the table, can you use those as your Shabbos candles instead of the ones that you're
Oh, why
lighting?
not?
Yeah, sure. Again, because the mitzvah is the resulting light. That's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is the resulting light. It's the opposite to Hanukkah. The Hanukkah candles, the mitzvah is the lighting, not the actual light itself. Right. In fact, you're not allowed to enjoy the light. Right? Whereas Shabbos candles is the reverse. The mitzvah is the resulting light. So whichever candle you use to result the light, the mitzvah is done. That's the main point here, yeah?
There's another advantage about lighting the candles is that
it takes you back to you're repeating the actions of all your foremothers, your ancestors.
Right.
Both my grandmothers had no electricity in their home.
Yeah, so right. That's a good point, which takes you back to like history of women lighting Shabbos candles for generations and generations, which would be the reason why we don't want to let go of this mitzvah. But that wouldn't justify making a bracha.
Oh.
To make a bracha, you'd have to justify it on like what's the halachic grounds upon which that bracha is being made, right? So the sentiment is there, but that doesn't necessarily justify the halachic component. Yeah.
Isn't there something that if, let's say, a wife or somebody is not home or in a hospital, but the husband lights candles, and he most likely is not necessarily going to eat there.
Yeah.
So it's part of that same question.
Correct. So
That's interesting.
in 2 weeks is going to be the Knesset Shluchas. My wife's not going to be in town. I'm going to light Shabbos candles and make a bracha. Because why shouldn't I? And she'll do it wherever she is, which is what she should do. And it's kind of fun. Right? It's like a thing my boys look forward to. We're watching Tati light Shabbos candles. It's an anomaly. It's exciting. It's exciting.
But
we do it.
Shabbos,
It's already become...
changes the week.
Right, so it's a sentimental thing that has become part of our observance of Shabbos, but it isn't a halachic thing, right? Yeah, but you are right. So if a woman's in the hospital giving birth or whatever, and she's lighting her candles there, the husband would light at home as well. And it would be the same thing. De facto, he's setting up his house for Shabbos, which includes making sure all the lights are in place as they are, and the bracha covers all of that. That's what I'm going to assume is the de facto unconscious intention of anybody making a bracha on their Shabbos candles, even if they aren't aware of that detail. That's what I'm going to... That's where we're going. Okay, so that was... So there was 4 practical applications already. You can use electric candles when needed. It has to be in the place of your meal. And we just discussed what happens if you're not eating at home. And number 4 is that the candles themselves have to be long enough to last into your meal. As opposed to like...
To the end of Shabbos.
As opposed to the end of Shabbos, or such short candles that they wouldn't even make it to your meal. Right? They have to be long enough to last into your meal. Okay.
You mean so the tea lights are not acceptable?
Sure they are. They last long enough. Tea lights last into your meals. Sure. That's what I use at home. That's what I use at home. Okay. Now another component of the Shabbos candles. Yep.
You're going to go into the Hanukkah thing later?
No.
Okay, so I have a Hanukkah question.
Sure.
Apparently, we're supposed to put out our menorah outside, not outside, to the window.
By the window, yeah.
Because we're a light unto the nation. But if you're telling me it's the lighting that's more important than the thing, and it's going to burn in 3 minutes, I tend to put an electric one out there, so it's there.
Yeah. So that electric one at your window is very good. I don't want to go too much down the rabbit hole of Hanukkah, but electric one by the window is good, so long as you're also lighting
No, of
literal
course,
one
of
for the
course,
mitzvah.
I wouldn't
Perfect.
go
Yeah.
to sleep and put.
Yeah.
And also, the Hanukkah candles go in 5 minutes. I mean, the party's over.
Okay, I don't want to go down the road there, but
Okay, but that's what you're saying.
the reason why those candles are okay is because the candles. Okay, I don't want to go to
Okay,
just
I know.
one little parenthesis and we're going to come back.
Okay.
But the Hanukkah candles, so long as the candles are capable of lasting for the correct amount of time, it's fine, even if they don't actually do so, which is what those candles are. In theory, those candles can last long enough. They don't. That's fine.
Well, that's,
But anyway,
you said
close the
it's
sidebar of
lighting that
Hanukkah.
counts, not the
Right.
duration.
Yeah, it has to be, whatever. Yeah, it has to be lit.
But it's okay.
The lighting is the most important, but it has to be
It's
lit.
okay to put electric in the window.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
The lighting is the most important at Hanukkah, but it has to be lit in such a way where it's capable of lasting long enough, even if you don't enjoy the light. But that's, I don't want to go down too far down Hanukkah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions about this before we go to the next part of Shabbos candles? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why are you saying to make peace between a jealous husband and his wife? You're talking about that thing with the saita or whatever, when she has to drink.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
We're talking
Well,
about
that's
peace.
We're going to come back to that soon. We'll come back to that soon.
Isn't that Shalom Bayit?
Yeah, we'll get back to that soon. I didn't read that yet. We're going to come back to that.
Yeah, I want to know why.
We're going to come back to it in a second, yes. Okay, another component of the Shabbos candles on the halachic level. When a woman lights Shabbos candles, she's taking upon herself Shabbos. In that moment, she's taking upon herself Shabbos. Now, taking upon oneself Shabbos is in and of itself a mitzvah. There's a mitzvah it's called Tosefet Shabbos, which means to add from the weekday onto Shabbos. So to explain. Once nightfall hits, Shabbos exists in the world. Shabbos mekacha v'kaima. Shabbos is there and it's sanctified, whether we do anything or not. Nonetheless, we are obligated to take upon ourselves Shabbos sometime before Shabbos starts, as a way of us demonstrating our appreciation of Shabbos by adding to the Shabbos and making Shabbos longer than the sun says Shabbos is, by taking upon Shabbos early, which is an important thing that often.
Say that again?
we are obligated to take Shabbos sometime before the sun tells us it's Shabbos. Meaning once the sun goes down, Shabbos begins. And we're obligated to take Shabbos in a little earlier to demonstrate our appreciation of it and so on. And it's derived from the verses. Sorry?
And we finish 1 hour later.
And we finish late as well. We add before and add after. Correct. Now, this obligation to take on Shabbos early is sometimes lost on men because men aren't lighting Shabbos candles and they're just kind of waltzing into Shabbos by technically being in shul. When in reality, they're actually supposed to take Shabbos on sometime early. There's even an opinion which says that they should do so verbally, like verbally take on Shabbos early. But be that as it may, women, when they light Shabbos candles, are definitely taking Shabbos in at that moment. So from when they light Shabbos candles, Shabbos starts, which means if there's something you need to do after Shabbos candle lighting, say for the sake of a mitzvah. So let's imagine.
Forgot a leg.
No, you're lighting Shabbos candles now,
No,
and then you want to go to visit someone in the hospital, but you don't want to walk there and back. You'd rather be able to drive there and then walk back after Shabbos, and you want to come back home to where your candles are lit. So you light Shabbos candles early enough, and you have in your mind that I'm not taking on Shabbos with this action of lighting. I'm only taking Shabbos once I arrive at the hospital, and then you can hop into your car, drive to the hospital, and leave it there, or take an Uber if you don't want to leave your car overnight there. Just to give you an example of a need where you'd have to delay the Shabbos acceptance, which you can do. Again,
You make the bracha?
you make the bracha and everything, and you have your intention is that my Shabbos is not starting until after I've done X.
So let's say Shabbat starts at 5. You would do this maybe at 4:30,
Exactly.
not 4:55.
That would be too late, but with enough time, as long as after what's called Plaga Mincha, you have the intention, you're lighting Shabbos candles for Shabbos with the bracha and everything, but you're not accepting Shabbos until you've done X
Right.
that you need to achieve.
Once you have to walk back, you're not.
Then you have to walk back. Shabbos starts
I
already.
remember doing it like Yom Kippur with my father, and like he used to take us to shul, and like we
Light Shabbos.
That's a good
light
one.
Shabbos candles or go with him.
That's a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, that was just like that's the only like I remember doing it.
So Yom Kippur is an example, by the way, of where we totally rely on the electric thing for making the bracha on the candles, because we're not eating a meal.
Right.
So in the old day, there's still value because you're not bumping into each other. Today you have electric, you aren't bumping into each other anyway. But we're all still lighting Yom Kippur candles, right?
Right.
So we're relying on the combination of the electric and the lights. Okay. So now there's a dispute, however. Okay, so lighting Shabbos candles takes upon ourselves Shabbos. We can make it conditional if the need is there. Now there's a dispute as to which moment in particular does Shabbos start when one lights the Shabbos candles. Opinion A, is it at the moment of lighting? Opinion B, it's at the time of bracha. At the time of making of the bracha. What's the difference? Well, if it's at the time of making the bracha, then I light my candles. I can blow out the wick and then make a bracha, because then when I make the bracha, Shabbos starts. But if Shabbos starts when I light the candles, not by the bracha, so as soon as I light, I can't blow out the candle.
But can you put it at, let's say there's a vent that has air coming out of the vent, and you happen to put it.
It's a little bit problematic.
In the old days,
So what you do is you have a little silver tray, and you put the match down on the silver tray and let it burn out. That's what we do.
In general, I remember learning that you shouldn't put out a match because like you're putting out in a shower.
Blowing out for sure.
Yeah.
Waving out is
Yeah.
a little thing. But blowing out, that's a thing. We don't blow out candles. That's also true because of candles are sold. But so you take the wick and you put it down onto a silver plate or a metal plate and it burns itself out. Right? That's the common practice. Again, for this reason, because at least according to one opinion,
what if you put water in it?
when you light, putting water there is also problematic because that would be an actively putting it out. You can't put water. Couldn't put it into water. So again, this is because there's that opinion which says the moment you light candles, Shabbos starts.
And that's the opinion we go by?
We certainly, we follow that for stringency, and therefore we do not wave out the
But Havdalah, you could put it.
Havdalah. Already Shabbos is over,
Okay, so you can have it.
so we don't wave out the match.
Wow.
Now the question becomes: if the primary mitzvah is only 2 candles, and Shabbos starts when you light candles, how are you continuing to light a bunch of other candles? Okay, so it's baked into the intentionality because the custom is that we light all these candles, so all these other candles are an extension of the mitzvah. So you can still be doing it. But once the last candle's lit, it's already Shabbos, and we don't we don't blow out the wick, the match. You put it down.
Oh, can I ask
Yep.
a question? I'm sorry, I'm interested. Because when I went to shul, my son's shul, and remember it was Yom Kippur, and the big speech was intention, the word intention.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember him telling me, because something about the children or whatever, and the light in the fridge somehow didn't get undone, and he had to find a way to figure it out. But he's talked about the idea of intention. It wasn't.
Okay,
You know,
the light in the fridge is a whole different discussion that I don't want to go into right now.
But it's not a Shabbos thing.
It is a Shabbos thing, but it's a related topic, but not
But the
to...
word intention, like if I was in.
There are certain elements of intention, with respect to the observance or violation of Shabbos, but I want to leave it alone because it's not for right now.
I'd like to hear about
Yeah.
intention.
The intentionality when it comes to the observance and the violation of Shabbos is an interesting one, and it's also halachically related, but I don't want to go there right now because it's another topic. Yeah. Okay, so that's number one with respect to accepting Shabbos and the moment of when it happens, whether the bracha lighting candles. Now, there's another component, which is that one should make a bracha, what's called oiver lasiyasan, which means we always recite a blessing before we take the action upon which the blessing is going to take effect. So we make the blessing before we eat. We make the blessing before we shake the lulav and esrog. We make the blessing before we hear the shofar, and so on and so forth. Now, when it comes to the Shabbos candles, we have a problem. On the one hand, we just said that the moment you light, Shabbos starts, and therefore you can't shake out the match. If that were the case, then make a blessing before you light the Shabbos candles, and then light them. All good. But however, the other opinion said that when did Shabbos start? When you make the blessing. Now, if you make a blessing before you light, and Shabbos starts, you can't light because Shabbos started with the blessing. So now you have to make the blessing after you light the Shabbos candles. Now, if you're making the blessing after you light the Shabbos candles, how does it happen before you do the mitzvah? This is where the idea of covering your eyes comes from.
Oh, really?
Yes. So you light the candles. So, at least according to one opinion, Shabbos started, and therefore you don't blow out your match. Then you cover your eyes, you make a bracha, and then you open your eyes. So you made the blessing before you enjoyed the candles.
Right.
Because while you were making the blessing, you didn't enjoy it because you covered your eyes. So, level one of covering your eyes for the Shabbos candles is a very technical halachic one.
Wow.
So that you make the blessing before you enjoy the actual candles themselves. So you asked which opinion do we follow, the Shabbos start at the lighting or the bracha? Answer is both. We take the stringencies of both. We take the stringency of the first opinion, which says that it happens when you light, vis-a-vis not blowing out the match. But we take the other opinion that it starts at the blessing, vis-a-vis not making a bracha before we light.
But on Yom Tov, you don't have to.
Good question. Before I answer that question, let's first finish this.
Question about before.
I'm explaining in a second.
Okay.
So again,
Go ahead.
so because we want the bracha to be before you enjoy the candles, but after you've already lit them, because according to one opinion, once you lit them, Shabbos starts and it's over. So you make the bracha after while your eyes are closed, and therefore it's before you're enjoying the candles, because again, the main point of the mitzvah is to enjoy the candles.
Right.
So you cover your eyes. Okay. Now I'm going to add that, notwithstanding the fact that there's a technical halachic reason for covering our eyes, and interestingly enough, although there are some halachic authorities that include the importance of praying during the time when one covers their eyes, like praying for blessing and whatnot, the Alter Rebbe in his code does not make mention of that custom to pray. And the Rebbe was once asked about it, and he wrote, "Look, I don't want to mix in."
Wow.
Nonetheless,
Wow.
the Rebbe did once publicly speak of the fact that whilst one covers their eyes for Shabbos candlelighting, it is an opportune time to ask of Hashem whatever they want. Additionally,
Exactly.
there are sources that discuss, in addition to covering one's eyes, closing one's eyes, which is not necessary halachically if your eyes are covered. Your eyes are covered, the halach is fine. You're going to enjoy the candles after. But closing one's eyes has a mystical added benefit, some sources note, and to close one's eyes, in addition to covering one's eyes, to pray during that time. So, although the davening is an important component, it's like a layer deeper than the halachic technical component. Okay, to the question of Yom Tov. So where's the question? The question is, when it comes to Yom Tov, you may light candles. You may light candles in Yom Tov. So why not make the bracha first and then light? No problem. You can light on Yom Tov. Even if you're following the opinion which says that Yom Tov starts once you make the bracha, no problem. You can still light after you make a bracha. So seemingly, no halachic reason to cover your eyes on Yom Tov. Follow?
I was to say from an existing flame.
You light from a pre-existing flame, which you have to have anyway.
Right.
You have to have your pre-existing flame anyway to light the Shabbos candles. So you can make the bracha. Yom Tov starts, no problem. Light your candles anyway because you're allowed to light candles on Yom Tov. Answer, you can never light the match anyway. Answer, says the code of Jewish law, if we were to do that, it'd be very confusing. Here you do cover your eyes, here you don't cover your eyes. Universal, you always cover your eyes. It makes it easier to remember. Added to the fact that if there's a spiritual component to prayer, we definitely want to keep it universal, so you can always have that added benefit of closing one's eyes and praying. Even though you're right, there's no technical halachic reason why you need to cover your eyes at the Yom Tov candles. Nonetheless, to keep it uniform and to have that added value of bracha, we do cover our eyes as well by Yom Tov.
Okay,
Yeah?
so this is, I don't know if it's in everybody, it's just a family thing, but we've always taken the flame before, like this type of thing,
Yeah, the 3 times isn't,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly, and we say,
I forgot to mention that, yeah.
Yeah,
The waving 3
that's
times actually
important.
is like a physical gesture of I'm taking Shabbos on.
Yeah,
that's really what it
there's
is.
no specific words like.
There are things people say, but it's a beautiful thing, but it's not technically, halachically required. The basic motion is to demonstrate taking Shabbos in. Yes, correct.
Okay,
Okay.
but you don't cover your eyes because it's after. You don't cover your eyes because you cover your eyes is before you light the candles.
You light the candles 3 times,
Yeah. and
cover
then
your
you
eyes.
okay.
Yeah.
But you can still say the person.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Sure.
I got it, okay.
Okay, so is that clear?
Yeah.
So far, so clear? Good.
Yeah.
Okay. We understand this, and a lot of situations come up. We'll understand better how to understand the halacha of what we need to do when the situation comes up. Okay, so now back to the Rebbe's institution and the halachic polemic that ensued. So a hallmark or a centerpiece of the Rebbe's Shabbos candle lighting campaign in 1974-75, 50 years ago, is that women and girls who aren't married and even under bat mitzvah should light candles with a bracha. Based on everything we just heard, where the halachic component that justifies a bracha is the fact that there's peace in the home and you can see and enjoy the meal and so on and so forth, it's irrelevant for anyone more than one person to light candles. And in fact, the mitzvahs, anybody can do it. Even the husband can do it, right? We finished saying, woman's not at home, the husband should do it because it's the mitzvah. Right? So where's the validity? Where's the value in a single girl who's living at home to light the candles? It seems like there's no halachic value for it. Which is why, yeah?
Isn't it just all about connecting to Hashem? Like, what is the halachic value anyway?
Right, so
Everything is shalom bait.
that you're 100% correct. So again, so you're right, connecting to Hashem, and everybody's going to talk about that in a moment, the importance of the spiritual component of it. But we still need to appreciate those who are coming from it at a very halachic level. As if you want to justify a blessing, you have to have a halachic grounding for it. Right? In other words, a person couldn't say, for example, I want to connect to Hashem, so I'm now going to make a bracha and blow the shofar. It's not Rosh Hashanah today. You can't do that. Because they're our halachic parameters to when shofar applies. So what are the halachic parameters for when candle lighting applies? So if for example, my wife is lighting Shabbos candles, and I decide, Levi decides, I want to connect to Hashem, so I'm going to make a bracha and light Shabbos candles next to my wife. That doesn't have any halachic foundation. I couldn't do that. That would be a blessing in vain, because she's already lighting.
But you could do it as your own personal connection to Hashem.
No, I couldn't make the blessing on it. That would be a blessing in vain, considering that it has no halachic validity, because she's already doing it.
So halacha
So
comes
that,
first,
in terms of making the blessing, sure, the halacha takes sure. That's the foundation. And the spiritual gets stacked on top of it, if you will. Or embedded into it is a better way to put it. You embed the spiritual feelings into the halachic observance, if you want to put it that way.
Okay, so a man who's not married, can he light the candle?
Has to. A man who's not married has to light the Shabbos candles. Because who's lighting it for him? He's living at home alone. He has to absolutely must light the Shabbos candles. And light 2. Because again, the 2 is because of the 2 Zachav Hashem, the 2 phrasings that the Torah uses. So a man living alone has to light Shabbos candles, including a bachar and yeshiva.
I'm sure that there's many men in your congregation who don't know that.
All right, well, let's not go there.
So perhaps they'll listen to the recording.
No, I think they would like
Yeah, no, 100%. Correct.
I'm-
I actually, a few weeks ago on Shabbos afternoon, I spoke about this, so maybe some of the men were there that may have heard that. But yes, you're right. A man living alone would be required to. Yeah?
If I go visit my father who lights candles, does my father have to light when I light?
Good question. So if you're visiting
My father. who
your
also
father,
lights?
so in theory,
Yeah.
you're part of his lighting, and your husband's doing it also on your behalf in your house.
So he should light and I don't?
You would light with, you'd light with him, yeah. You'd light with him,
Make
yeah.
my bracha. And my father
You make, yeah,
lights.
yeah,
What happens
yeah.
if her whole family's there with her?
well,
Then
that's-
certainly you would light there.
No, I'm saying, but
But
does
does
he
my
all-
father not have to?
Does your father not have to?
Or does he do it
Ooh,
anyway?
does your
because-
father not have to because he's going to make you an agent. He can make you an agent to light on his behalf. Yeah, he can make you
For
an
that
agent.
week he wouldn't light.
He could make you an agent to light on his behalf.
And the same
If he wanted to
thing
continue,
in
he
my
could do so.
house.
Sorry?
If he comes to visit
Correct.
me, he doesn't have to light.
No, it doesn't have to. No. So if you're visiting somebody else, as a rule,
You go.
there's a de facto idea that because the host is hosting you, the host gifts you part of ownership of the candles, so that you also have a part of that mitzvah. When I was in yeshiva, there was a bacher, one of the boys in yeshiva was very into the laws of Shabbos candle lighting, and he lit Shabbos candles on all of our behalf and made sure he had enough candles that were expensive enough that we can each hold a little portion in the candles. Because we have to light Shabbos candles. We're not at home. We're living in yeshiva. We have to have Shabbos candles.
But you don't have ones who, like you had this guy, he could have done it for all.
He did. One person did it for everybody in yeshiva. Yeah. It's a real thing.
Stupid question. What is
Yeah.
the age of girls?
Okay, so let's go through that right now. Okay, so because of everything we just said till now, the common practice was, and maybe in still some circles it still is, that only a married woman or a woman living at home would light Shabbos candles. A woman living in her parents' home, whether she's over or under bat mitzvah is irrelevant, would not light Shabbos candles because again, there's no value. Halachically speaking, it's like the same thing as me lighting Shabbos candles with my wife. What's the difference? As long as the house has the peace in the home and the enjoyment of the meal, there's no reason for anyone else to light. But the Rebbe insisted, no. A woman who is single or anywhere, even under bat mitzvah, she's from 3 years old and up,
Wow.
should begin lighting candles with a bracha. And this raised the ire of many halachic authority, especially those who strictly follow the Bet Yosef. The Bet Yosef is the author of the Code of Jewish Law, who is a Sephardi, and in many circles is the default halachic mainstay authority. And his position in general was to minimize blessings. Now, why would you minimize blessings? The reason why one would minimize blessings is because there's a very serious prohibition, one of the 10 commandments, in fact, not to take God's name in vain. A blessing has God's name. If you're not required to say that blessing, then the blessing is God's name in vain. And therefore, there are those who are of the view, Bet Yosef being the leader amongst them, that would say, unless you absolutely need to make the blessing, don't. And therefore, they argued that girls who are living with their parents, even over bat mitzvah, should not make a blessing on their candles and shouldn't light at all. And this created quite a big polemic in 1975, when they came out with this campaign, very strongly urging that women and girls, even from age 3 and up, should light candles and make the blessing. And they've made a number of arguments, and this kind of gets to your point of the spiritual connection to Hashem. This is what we're going to address here. Firstly, the Rebbe argued, just on halachic level, on a precedent level, although it's true that in many circles the common practice is that women and girls do not light Shabbos candles, only the mother of the home or the woman of the home. Nonetheless, in many communities it was the case where they did do that. And there were listed various different communities where they did that. And they were kind of hinted at the fact that in many communities, the fact that they didn't do it is because of how expensive it would have been. Today, how much does a few tea lights cost? But in the old day, getting candles for all your kids every single week, or whatever meant oil or this or that or the other, it could be very expensive and could become a lot. So they just didn't do it. But there were communities and families that did do it. So on a precedent level, the Rebbe had grounds to build on. Number one. Number two is just like every mitzvah that children are not obligated to do because they're children, they still make a bracha for educational purposes. Likewise, mitzvahs that women aren't obligated to do, but voluntarily do so, they also make a bracha. At least according to most authorities. Shofar, sukkah, lulav, these are mitzvahs that women aren't necessarily obligated to do so because they're time-bound, but nonetheless, a bracha is made. All right? I should note that those who are in the hardcore camp of girls should not make a bracha on the candles before they get married are also in the camp of women should not make bracha when they shake lulav and etrog. There is that group, and it still exists till today. Because again, taking the Beit Yosef hardline, it's not all Sephardim. There's other authorities that disagree with this position, but there is that hardline position that says minimize brachas at all costs, and they would be of the view that women should not, if you're not married, if you aren't the only woman of the home, don't make a bracha on candles, and don't make a bracha on your lulav and etrog or shofar. But nonetheless, majority of Jews do make a bracha on shofar and lulav, even if they're not obligated, such as women. So likewise here, they can make the bracha on the candles even if they're unobligated because it's a mitzvah for them. And then the Rabbi added another component, which is an interesting one. One of the blessings associated with lighting Shabbos candles, our sages tell us, is that one is meticulous to light Shabbos candles merits to have sons and sons-in-laws who are Torah observant and scholars. So they're like this. It used to be that the parents were the ones who decided who their daughter marries. So it was on the parent to make sure the Shabbos candles, so they can choose or get the merit of choosing a nice husband for their daughter. But today, she's making the decision on her own who she wants to marry. And therefore, she should light, so she gets the blessing of marrying a gay husband that's a good husband for her, a scholar or whatnot. So she should light, so she can get the blessings. They've added that, which is an interesting twist. Additionally, and just to the general sentiment, and we'll conclude with this, is a lot of the pushback was also, my grandmother didn't do it, my great-grandmother didn't do it. Why are you making me do this? Like, my grandmother didn't light Shabbos candles until she got married. My great-grandmother didn't light Shabbos candles until I got married. You want me to start telling my daughter to do something different than my grandmother and great-grandmother? It's not nice, not fair. And someone wrote to the Rebbe like this. My grandmother didn't do it, my great-grandmother didn't do it, now you're asking my daughter to do it. I feel uncomfortable with it. And Rebbe responded by saying, your grandmother and great-grandmother didn't have television either. Something along those lines. Yeah. Something along those lines. Meaning to say, the world that your grandmother and great-grandmother lived in was a wholesome world in the shtetl, in which all they had was their parents' influence. So good. They were under their parents' influence, the Shabbos candles, and they got the influence there. Your daughter does not have that reality. The reality of your daughter's world is that she lives in a big, wide world with lots of things that she sees and knows, and therefore, it's required to bolster her observance by giving her the opportunity to light Shabbos candles on her own, even though your grandmother and great-grandmother didn't do it. Because there's lots of things in your life that your grandmother and your great-grandmother didn't do. And finally, they've made the following point. On a number of different occasions, a number of different contexts, but for the context of candle lighting. They always spoke of this idea in addressing the American youth, that today the reality of the culture of youth is listening to authority is not a thing. Mm-hmm. It's just not a thing. The thing to look up to is independence.
Ego.
That's the American ways. Independence, right? America was founded on a revolution. That's how it is. It's independence. Canada was founded on a peace treaty. We're much more calm people, much nicer people, because we were founded on a treaty, not on a revolution, right? But nonetheless, the idea of the Western world being independent is still a thing, even for us here in Canada. Independence is the hallmark. So, if you wanted to have independent, strong Jewish people, then from a young age, they should feel independently strong and Jewish. And therefore, you tell the girl at 3 years old, you can't rely on mommy's candles. You got to do your own candles. So right from the start, there's a message being given to them. You got to have your own Yiddishkeit. And that infuses their independence with a feeling of Yiddishkeit, rather than Yiddishkeit being a pushback against their independence. Their Yiddishkeit is embedded into their independence. And yeah, you're 3 years old. No, you got to write your own candles, not just mommy's candles, because you're your own girl and you got to make your own bracha. They spoke about that in a number of different contexts, but here in this context with Shabbos candle lighting, Rebbe said that as well. Any questions or thoughts before we conclude?
I don't know if it's a sin or whatever. What happens if they're 3 years old? Couldn't the mother light it off her own candle and get so that it's still Or is that?
I imagine most 3-year-olds, their mother would be holding their hand anyway when they light the candles, you
No,
know.
but I'm saying even a kid, she can never take the lit from hers, because I know you do that, like, to give for them to give the candle.
She should probably light her own.
Okay, so it's
Probably light her
basically,
own, yeah.
there's nothing off the mother.
Yeah, she's lighting her own candles. That's the idea. It's like
No,
boost
no,
her
I
confidence. She's
understand.
lighting her own
I'm
candle.
saying it's not from the candle of
Yeah.
the mother.
There are a number of things like that. Like they've been encouraged very strongly that children should have their own chumash and siddur in their room with their name on it, because it's my chumash, it's my siddur, this is my.
So it's a whole
It's like it's
concept.
part of the whole. It's part of an entire like philosophy of education
Okay.
of like giving the children that confidence that this is your Yiddishkeit. It's yours that you have to make for your own. You have your own room with your own pushka, your own charity box, your own chumash, your own siddur, your own tilim, your own tanya, and I'm lighting my own candles also.
Okay.
Right? It's like it's my Judaism. Everyone wants to empower that.
remember on the Cary, when the Cary, on the Cary
Oh, yeah.
Expressway, when that big sign came out in the 70s.
Yes, I remember that.
Remember?
Shabbos candles?
Now,
Oh,
It was on the heels of this campaign.
Yeah.
Part of the campaign was, that's right, part of the campaign was or is to advertise Shabbos candle lighting times.
It made a hit. I mean, it really,
Well,
So you know the story with the New York Times?
no.
No.
This is a famous one. So one of the initiatives, again, a part of this campaign, was to advertise Shabbos candle lighting reminders and advertisements for when Shabbos candles is to be lit. And for years, I think it still goes on, Chabad sponsored ads in the front page of the New York Times of what time Shabbos candle lighting is, with like a number or a website to go to see for other areas where to light Shabbos candles outside of New York and what time. Okay. So I can't remember when it was. Maybe I guess it was the year 2000, when the New York Times ran a mock front page of what 2100 would look like. Like what would the front page what would like the front page in the newspaper look like in 100 years from now?
Yeah.
And they had things like, spaceships landing on Mars and all the typical stuff like, futuristic things that they think will exist in 100 years. And in the corner was the ad from Chabad that light Shabbos candles. Because no matter what happens in the world and what changes, you can be sure that Jewish women will be lighting Shabbos candles, and therefore the ad's still going to be there even 100 years from now. Yeah.
The most Jewish advertising we had when we were teenagers was a big poster of an Inuit with a big space between his teeth, holding a bagel, saying you don't have to be Jewish to eat bagels.
That's funny.
It was cute.
So in conclusion, as we began, Shabbos candles, Nerot Shabbat Kodesh, the first letter is being Neshek, ammunition. The Midrash we quoted that the Shabbos candles, God grants the lights of Zion. And in addition to the fact that we're reading the story of the Exodus the last few weeks, and our sages tell us that it's B'schut Nashim Tzidkanias, it's the result of righteous women that we left Egypt. So combining all that together, may that indeed be for us. The Shabbos candles bring about the neshek, the proper ammunition that the Jewish people need, along with the light of Zion, shining forth for all and forever, and will be redeemed speedily. Amen.
Amen.